ustedes. Y'all don't know anything about racing. This is true. You're right. You're in the wrong show.
Yeah.
You're watching the wrong show if you want to hear like super engineer stuff.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Hitting the Apex. It's joined by Evan. How's it going, man?
Good. Getting ready for another fun week this week.
Yep. Shout out to Carly as well in the chat. Yeah, it's funny how quickly we've gotten used to just having a race every week. And, it used to be, like 10, 15 a year total. And now there's 23? Is that the right number?
No, I think more than that.
Yeah, it's more than that. And obviously the winter, there's no racing. So it is a majority of the year there are races on a weekend now. We kind of built up that tolerance to it. And now when there's a week off, like, wait, what? There's no F1 this weekend. Right. Fortunately, coming up, we got Imola.
Exactly.
The Emilia-Romagna.
Emilia-Romagna, formerly your favorite name of it.
I cannot stop calling it San Marino. I don't know. I mean, it isn't San Marino. It's in Italy, not San Marino. San Marino is so it was misnomered, but that's what it was called.
And then isn't it like what was it like last year? It was like the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix sponsored by this at Imola.
The 1 year. Yeah, was the last year. 1 year it was like a mile long.
Yeah, the name was completely crazy, but at the end of the day, it's still a great race at a great track and track with a lot of history. Not great history, but a lot of history.
Yep.
So.
The name. Shout out to Brandon, of course, one of our regulars.
What up, Brandon B?
I guess we can start right there. You mentioned the track has a lot of history. Let's take a look and get your thoughts on the track. Obviously, you said not necessarily a good history. It is 63 laps, about almost 5 kilometers in distance. So what are your thoughts on the track? Only one DRS zone is what stands out for me. What about you?
Yeah, and it's the fastest part of the track going into that first chicane at 2 and 3. That whole first section right there between turns 2 and turn 7 are classic sight of Formula One. Like we were saying before, it's got a lot of history there. Not a lot of great history, but a lot of history. We lost one of the greatest drivers of all time in Ayrton Senna at this track. I think it was
in that section, right? That's where his steering wheel broke going into, I think, turn 2. And the track was a little different laid out then, but
exactly. It was a lot faster back then. It was more of just a slight turn instead of a chicane there. That's actually why they added the chicane there, was to slow it down a little bit, because this was kind of like the Monza 2.0. A lot of these tracks in Italy, like Monza, are super fast tracks that are good for the cars with high horsepower and like Ferrari had for a while. The track is even named after the son of Enzo Ferrari and Dino. So this is again a classic track. It's the first track that we got this year out of the European swing, which is always exciting to have this lineup of tracks that we're going into now between here, Spain, and then I know we go Canada or something like that, or Monza or Monaco. Coming up as well.
Yeah, so, Monaco's a week early this year. It's no longer Memorial Day. It's a big shift.
Oh yeah, so you have a lot of these changes, or a lot of these tracks, like I was saying, that are all classic historical tracks, and this is really the start of it. So it's good to see. It's great when you see the fans there. The Ferrari fans are going to be out in force. So it's always a good race as long as there's no flooding issues and stuff like that, which I know we had a couple of years ago. There was a point where we were afraid that we weren't going to have a race because of how bad that region was. But I think that's probably why they moved it up a little bit. The time frame was to kind of get it out of that range of when they have their wet season and stuff like that. So, like I said, it should be a good race overall. Last year was a fantastic race. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But how about you? What do you think about this track overall?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. It's a classic track. It's a really technical track, so the drivers are going to be on it. It's hard to tell from the layout, but as you mentioned, it's very these turns are very much high speed. So having the car well balanced. We're going to talk about the tires in a minute. Will be interesting, but yeah, really. But with that said, not a lot of overtaking opportunities. So you really do have to. I think there'll be a lot of the overtakes will be by mistakes because it is technically tricky, and you make a mistake, that's when the car behind you can pounce. But it's not one of those tracks where it's easy to overtake. There's just the one opportunity, and that's not that long of a straight. So it is. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think it puts a premium on the skill of the driver, which is always a good time. When these guys, these are the best drivers in the world when they're challenged to their limits, and this is definitely a physically demanding track as well. So I think it'll be I'm looking forward to it. I really do like the track, despite its, as you said, unfortunate history.
Yeah, going into that section right there, 10, 11, 12, 13, the aqua minerale is what it's called. Mineral water, I guess is the translation for it. But it's one of those classic areas you see a big undulation in elevation there. These cars, even with how big they are and how stable they are, you can see them get loose. And then that little run right there between 12, 13 into 14 is one of the highest G-force areas in Formula One, because what happens is as they accelerate out of that 12, 13, you have to come to almost a complete stop, kind of something like what we saw at Suzuka a couple weeks back in that last little chicane that they had before the start finish line. It's a similar thing. And then going down into that 17, 18, that's actually a pretty decent overtaking opportunity there, because you have I believe the DRS detection zone is right there between 15 and 16, which is a long ways before that DRS zone actually happens. So what you could see happen a lot is you'll get somebody who's within that 1 second, and then they'll fall out of the 1 second if they don't have a good 17 and 18, and they still got that DRS going for that whole back straight. So, it is an interesting layout. I do like the fact that they have that DRS detection zone so far back. That kind of makes for some interesting, scenarios going into that first DRS section, or into that only DRS section. And again, the history of this track, the knowledge that these drivers have of it, makes for a lot better racing. It makes for, people know the limits of where they can make those passes. Like you said, it makes it for more difficult but more technical racing overall.
Yeah, and I wonder if, given the detection line is so far back on the straight, and see how many cars they have. They're trying to take a risk here and overtake into turn 17, because if you're behind at the detection point, you can take that spot and then have DRS to really pull away. So
it's a possibility.
It does raise the prospect of kind of diving into turn. 16 is not really a turn, but 16, 17, that area, and trying to overtake there if you were behind at the detection zone, gives you a you can, if you make it stick there, and then also get the DRS going at turn 19, it'll allow you to really pull away. So So you mentioned the tire. Did you just backstage, or I can't remember if this was before the show or not. But the tires, huge story this weekend. There's a new tire compound. The C6 is a new tire this year. That is the softest tire that Pirelli makes now, and it's a new category of tire. And this is the first time we're going to see it. So even though it's been technically a tire this year, Pirelli chose to wait until Imola for obvious reasons. It's where they could test it more and be confident that it'll work. So they waited until Imola to unleash it. So we have what are the three softest tires in the Pirelli range here, but a tire in the C6 that did not exist in previous years. So it's softer than a previous year's softest range. So just for some context, last year was a one-stop race for pretty much everyone. And the hard tire, which was a C3 last year, look to be the best tire. So they don't have a tire that hard this year. The C4 was the medium last year. The C5 was the soft. So everything stepped down a level. So I guess, what are your overall thoughts on the tire decision? Are you excited to see a little variability here with an even softer tire?
Yeah, well, like you said, being that Pirelli's an Italian company, the track Imola is obviously in Italy. They do have a lot of information about this track. They have a lot of ability to test on these tires at this track. So they have all that data. Really, I guess, led them to say, okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and use this tire here, which is going to be exciting. That whole first section with those two chicanes right there in the beginning and through where the DRS zone is a high speed, affair. And you're going to see these guys in qualifying flat out through most of those curves, maybe lifting a little bit going into that turn two, just to settle the car in. But overall, that's going to be a pretty flat out area. To see these things on these tires, it's going to be really interesting. I didn't really think that they were going to use those tires until Monaco, because obviously Monaco is, it's you need the
Monaco. I mean, we'll get. I guess is that next week's preview? It's the week before. Yeah, I think so. But man, we're already there.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're gonna require a second pit stop there, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, but I figured that they were going to wait to use those C6s until there, because you need the stickiest tires on that track, just because of how tight and technical that track is. But it's going to be good to see them here and see how they last out. Obviously, we're only going to see them really in the qualifying session, but we'll be able to get a lot of information off of just that, and seeing how these guys, if they fall off after a first lap, if they need how long the push lap needs to be for them to, or the prep lap needs to be for them to be able to get them lit up. There is such an interesting thing that we will talk about later when it comes to tire temperatures, especially with Red Bull and what they're talking about with the McLarens. So, we'll get into that a little bit later. But overall, this is going to be interesting to see how these tires fare out. And I think that it's going to make for good racing overall. Maybe even induce a two-stop strategy, depending on how these tires are, how the other two tires hold up the 4 and the 5s throughout the race. So,
that was actually the question I was going to ask you. So do you think, because we talked about this is not a track that's easy to overtake on, and as this generation of cars has evolved to the current state, which is kind of the final state of them, it's become harder and harder to overtake. And I do wonder if anyone will chance a two-stop, because being faster is fine, but then if you can't overtake, it doesn't matter. So yeah, that's some of the data they'll gather. I mean, we've had instances in the past, where the computer says, this is the fastest strategy.
Yeah.
And the actual practicality of I just can't overtake comes into play, and you end up, stuck. I do wonder if we see someone, though, potentially diving in for those softs in the race towards the end to see if, again, depending on the data they get out of the practices and then qualifying and how long they think they can last. But towards the end of the race, if you need to do a second stop, they might be an option there. But yeah, I expect almost everyone to start on the mediums, or maybe even the hards, because I don't think anyone started on the softs last year, and yet I think two cars did. Almost all of them started on what were the mediums last year and switched to the hards. So those are all the mediums last year, the hards now. So I don't know. We'll see because they got to use two compounds, so it's not like they have the option of going the hards twice. So yeah, the most effective tire from last year is not available. So
which I think is actually a good thing.
It's
going to switch things around.
Out to Jeff as always. I don't know about that Go Ferrari business, but the rest of it's good.
He's a classic guy at these classic tracks. He likes to see.
I mean, look, man, it's in the name. How are you gonna go against Ferrari this week? Yeah, so it'll be really interesting. Like, so the practices, I think, are going to be even more important, because they got to figure out the tire. This is a big variable for them, just in terms of how long are they going to last. What's faster, actually? Like you said, the softs will be probably the fastest tire they've driven on.
Yeah.
But can they even last a lap is the question, because even the C5s have sometimes struggle over a full lap and start wearing and losing performance. And obviously, this is that qualifying pace where you're just pushing everything. In a race, you can manage it a little bit better. But yeah, sometimes those C5s start to fall. You see drivers, go purple in the first 2 sectors and have it fall off in the third sector because they were just pushing too much and the softs couldn't hold up. And this is a step softer than that. So,
oh yeah,
should be fun.
Should be interesting to see. And that's where practice comes into play. We'll see all that start up on Thursday or Friday. I don't know why I said Thursday. We'll see all that start up on Friday. We'll get all that information. They'll do the long runs, they'll do the short runs, they'll do the qualifying preps and all that stuff. But going into that, why don't you go over the race schedule for this week?
Yep, as you said, Friday 7:30 is the practice 1. Practice 2 11 a.m. on Friday. Saturday practice 3 6:30 a.m. Qualifying at 10, and then the race is Sunday at 9 a.m.
Love these times, by the way. Love these times.
Literally was in our backyard last time, so we have now come off of our time zone to European time. So this is your classic kind of race calendar for a weekend. It's just gonna no sprint race, obviously. So those 3 practice sessions are huge. It's gonna be important to have that track time too, to figure out what to do with these tires. I think they'll have a level of comfort with the mediums and the hards, but they got to figure out where to work the softs. And certainly in qualifying, they're going to want to use them. And then, as I said, potentially if they have to do a 2-stop, they might be an option in the race. Or, last year these were the C5s, but a couple of drivers started on them just because, you qualified a position, you got to make places up. Again, this is a track that is difficult to overtake, so you might try to use the tire offset to do that. So I think, all those strategies are going to be available to the team. So we'll see. Based on how those practices go, is it even worth trying to throw? If those softs are going to last 4 laps, there's no point in starting on them. Even if you make up some places, you're going to give it all back. So.
Yeah, and this typically, besides for obviously what we talked about with the history of the track, this isn't a track that there, especially in more recent years, there hasn't been a lot of big like yellow flags or red flag running or anything like that. So you can't really bank on there being a safety car or anything like that. You got to kind of think that this is going to be a pretty solidly ran race that just goes on.
Yeah, I guess
free.
Yeah, I think the one exception to that, and we can talk about that next, is there have been, and you mentioned this has happened in the past too. There have been weather issues here in the past. Now it's a little bit. It's not full on. Definitely gonna rain, but it looks like there's an opportunity for some 24% chance on Friday, 36%. Some showers. Looks like more in the morning, potentially into the afternoon. So it could throw a variable because it just takes 5 minutes of it on the track, and you have to switch tires because
for sure
cars go to undrivable when it gets wet on slicks. So
as we saw with Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, absolutely. Another variable. This is also the track where this is when Bottas was in the Mercedes, but when Russell and him came together on the straight in the wet, kind of both crashed out. So yeah, if it gets if it gets even damp, we could see some stuff because again we've been harping on the technical nature of the circuit, how difficult it is to drive, and it's not a circuit that lends itself to good performance when it's damp and you have slicks on. So while that might be technically faster than the Inters, it's going to put more of a challenge on the driver. So we'll see. That is a potential variable. 36%, so not a guarantee or anything, but it is certainly possible.
Yeah, and on top of that, you always have the other part of we have a good amount of rookies in the field this year, and we have a new one coming in with Franco Colapinto in that Alpine. So there's a lot of new guys on this track with these cars at these speeds. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But again, you can't really bank on there's going to be yellow for that second pit stop. So I still fully believe it's going to be a one-stop race, that it's going to be a pretty decent, clean race overall, that will be an okay amount of overtaking, but we'll see how it plays out. I want to go into like last year also, this was kind of the race that you really saw that pace of the McLaren, even though Lando didn't win that race last year, it was still Max that won it. You saw how much he caught up to Max in that final stint of the race. He got within 1 second after being down almost 20 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, this was the one where he was chasing him down, just couldn't overtake. Yeah.
Yeah, so you really started to see the pace of that McLaren really start to step up after Lando got his first win of his career last year in Miami. So I expect them to be decent. Again this year. We'll get into that when we get into predictions. So other than that, what else did you want to talk about with the track? Anything?
No, I think it's one of those, like you said, it's a classic track. It should be a fun race. It's technically challenging, and then I hadn't even considered. And I guess this is a good lead into the standings, but the number of rookies and how they're going to cope with a lot of them first time on this track. Some of them have driven it in junior series, but not the same thing. And then, in addition to that, the technical nature of it might be difficult. Again, look at the stands. Obviously, got the McLarens up top. Max still within striking distance, as is George Russell. And then pretty big drop off from there to Leclerc and Ali Hamilton. And then once again, shocking the Red Bull disparity.
Yeah.
90-point difference already is pretty stark. Obviously, Yuki wasn't in the Red Bull the whole year, but he gets the point from the Racing Bulls. They keep changing the name every year. But as you mentioned, I guess we should start. Maybe we should talk a little bit. I mean, we're going to talk. Let's just, I guess, run through the drivers and talk about drivers looking out for. But you certainly mentioned one that'll have a lot of attention on them. But these are your constructor standings, when the constructors pretty much feels over. It's hard to imagine, anyone really catching up. The Mercedes isn't good enough, and the Red Bull only has one driver. Red Bull would be in play if they had a second driver that was able to consistently score points. If they don't, then Ferrari's further back, and there's a big drop off to win from there. That's the lay line coming into the weekend. So I think the big thing to watch again is that whole pecking order between between Piastri and Norris. It's been Piastri's, he's been the lead driver the last several weekends. Obviously, Lando had the opportunity in Miami in the first corner, and kind of whatever you want to say, that incident that kind of ruined his race, and he fought it back to second. But we'll see. Can Lando qualify ahead of him and keep it through the first lap? If he does that, again, 16 points is nothing at this point. So if he wins the race, he's going to have that deficit. So that's game on again. But Piastri keeps stacking wins. At some point, they might make a decision there that Lando doesn't like. So that's a championship context now. It's switching to kind of some individual things we're watching. What drivers are you looking for this weekend? I mean, who's interesting?
Well, I mean, going back to the rookies situation, I'm really kind of wanting to see what's going on with Kimi this week. This is his first kind of home race. If I'm not mistaken, I think that he's actually from this region of Italy. If I'm not mistaken, I'll look that up again. But he is an Italian driver, and it's his first race in Italy in a Formula One car. So it's going to be pretty exciting to see him. Plus Colapinto, first race in that Alpine, taking over for Bortoleto. Since we saw that go down this past week. So that's going to be interesting seeing those two. And then, like you were talking about going into the McLarens, to see how that all shakes out. I want to see if Lando can pull out that qualifying and get ahead of him, because we have seen that he has pace at this track. I don't remember exactly where Oscar finished last year in the race. See if you pull that up and we can figure that out. I don't remember exactly where he finished, but I do know that like we were saying, like I said earlier, that Lando did have a pretty decent race here last year. Even though he didn't win, he still showed that he did have solid pace coming around this track. And we know how fast this McLaren is. But you can never rule out Max. You can never rule out, George Russell from at least being up there in that mix. So, seeing those guys is going to be interesting. But the only other team that I would say I want to, see how they fare is, in my opinion, the fourth fastest team on this grid right now, which is that Williams. I do think that Williams, has shown a good amount of speed and has shown a good amount of they've had a good year so far, that they've made good decisions. They've done, stuff they've done well overall, and the pace is there.
Yeah. So just to circle back to last year, Piastri actually qualified ahead of Norris. He was second, Lando was third. But yeah, as you said during the race, Lando really stretched his legs and ended up finishing second, barely behind Max. Piastri ended up in fourth.
Okay.
So that's where they ended up last year. Did something happen? Wait, hold on. Piastri qualified second. There might have been a penalty. 3-place grid drop for repeating Kevin Magnussen. So he started in fifth.
Okay.
He finished second in qualifying, but started in fifth. So that's why, and then he moved up to fourth. But yeah, Lando was 0.7 seconds behind Max at the end of the race.
Yeah,
right on him. And yeah, for me, I'm looking at the actual fourth fastest team, at least so far this year, which is Ferrari. This is like I said, their names on the circuit. They've had a rough couple of weeks, and how they respond, the pressure is going to be even bigger on them this week at a de facto home race. Obviously, the Tifosi is going to be out there. They cannot repeat the mess from Miami where they split the strategies, but then somehow couldn't figure out how to arrange the cars. That was just an embarrassing moment for them. You'd like to think they'd learn from those things, but it's been years of this without them learning from it. So I don't have any illusion that that's going to happen. But I think there's a ton of pressure on them to at least. But they're not expected to win the race or anything or qualify in pole. But they have to put a reasonable, race pace out there and do things competently. And we are 2 races removed from Leclerc, finishing on the podium. I don't know if they have that potential. Obviously, like for them to do that, something has to go wrong with like the McLarens or Max, right? Otherwise, those cars are clearly faster. But getting into the top 5 and looking reasonable, not doing anything stupid, I think is going to be really important for them. Just to get a little bit of positivity, especially again at one of their home races, and hopefully rebound from what happened last time out. But another weekend like the last one,
especially in Italy.
Yeah, especially in Italy. Like I said, everyone's gonna be draped in red. That is not a situation where you want to show up there and have a repeat. So
yeah.
So that is that. I mean, you obviously mentioned the other teams to look out for. So that was an additional one that I thought would be interesting to see what they do this weekend. Now, believe it or not, it's hard to say this about a Ferrari. Sometimes we don't really see them on the screen anymore because they're just anonymous in the back half of the top 10. And that is another, they do need to do, I think, push. We need to see some overtake in that thing. Yeah. And then, as you mentioned, Colapinto was on a trial run of a few races, 6 races. So, every performance counts for him. He's got to put it out there because otherwise they'll go back to Duhan. So,
yeah.
That's just an interesting level of pressure that I can't recall a team doing that before. Where they're like, we're going to trial this guy, but we're going to keep the guy that we're replacing as a backup in case we want to swap him back. Like that is.
Well, teams might do that, but they might not say that they're going to do it.
They might not be that public about it.
Yeah.
And that's just going to put a lot of pressure on.
Like, we don't know if maybe this was the Red Bull strategy all year. Like, oh, we're going to try out Liam Lawson. If he doesn't work out, then we'll put Yuki in. It just all came out like, oh, yeah, no, we're just going to switch him because he's not doing good. Maybe it was a trial run. Maybe it was a similar situation to this, but we'll never know.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Liam Lawson is terrible, so on the track, I think he deserved to be fired a lot more quickly than Duhan did, to be honest. But he already got demoted, so they couldn't fire him twice in like a 3-race span. But I think he's been the worst driver on the grid this year, and he was in a Red Bull at the beginning and couldn't do anything. Obviously, in the Racing Bull's even harder, but I can't imagine he's going to do anything other than eventually get exited from that team, but and out of this level of racing, because as far as I can tell, he doesn't belong in F1. But at least he's not bad dangerous, because sometimes you get the bad ones that are dangerous. He's just like bad slow. So
I was just about to.
he's not endangering other people. We've certainly had worse. He's not the worst driver. We've had plenty of worse drivers, but this kid's actually quite talented.
I was just about to say top 5 worst drivers you've ever seen in Formula One. Go.
Well, it's definitely not him. I mean, can we count Pastor Maldonado when he won a race?
Yeah, I guess.
Because he knocks out, he pushes everyone else out. What's his? Oh God, what was the dude? The guy who subbed in for Ferrari, that was Luca Badoer. He's the worst.
Okay.
He is by far the worst driver I've ever seen. Like actually get in there, and like they just kept him on the team as the test driver back when you had actual testing.
Yeah.
Now they call him a reserve driver because they don't even get a chance to drive. But the test driver used to get to drive a lot because they do all the testing. They kept him in the car because he was Italian, he was local. They had to emergency put him in, and he was just awful. So he's my worst. Boy, you want me to go to 5, huh?
No, you don't have to do 5.
Give me a top 3 from your end. I'll do 3. How about that?
Mazepin.
Yeah, Mazepin's definitely going. Is that the worst, or is that third?
To me, Mazepin's the worst. To me, Mazepin.
Yeah, he would probably make my top 3 as well. I mean, there's been some awful drivers that have gotten opportunities because of money.
Paul di Resta.
I mean, he could be a candidate. Yeah, I mean, doing pundits, then Julian Palmer as well was terrible.
Julian Palmer, yeah.
If we're going that route, I'm trying to think back to like there aren't as many straight up pay drivers. Yeah. I mean, we're giving Lance Stroll a bit of a pass here. You shouldn't.
I mean, he might be in the top 5 if you're going to call 5.
Yeah, he's an option. Latifi. I mean, Williams.
Latifi. I didn't even think of Latifi.
Williams has cycled through in that second seat quite a few just awful drive. I mean, let's be real. Logan Sargent's on the list.
Oh, Logan Sargent has to be on the list too. You're right.
I mean, I'd say Maldonado is the most dangerous. The dude did not know where the brake pedal was and how to use it, but he somehow won a race. So I don't. It's hard to. It's hard to put him in there because that's something very few people are able to do, and he's done it.
Yeah, this is true.
I mean, PK Jr.
Nelson PK Jr. Not bad.
We could name dudes for a while now. It used to be like 4 or 5 on the grid every year. Like that guy.
Yeah, when they had more teams and the teams had to have somebody.
And then they had teams that really didn't have a budget to compete, and so they would just whoever gives us the most money can drive this car. And now these teams actually have money, so they're less. They're obviously still pay drivers, but you can't flat out unqualified buy a seat anymore like you used to be able to. You brought enough money and they would put you in the car even if you had no business staying there. So you don't get that as much anymore.
Yeah, really the last one of those, I mean, unless you want to say Stroll, but the last one of those was really Mazepin. Was the last one that it was, the only reason he was in that car was because Daddy's name was on the side of
and I mean to your point, Stroll was obviously, if not for his father, he would no longer be in Formula One. But people might not remember back when he drove for Williams and stuff when he was a pay driver, but Daddy didn't own the team then.
Yeah,
that was later. So when they bought, at the time was it Racing Point or whatever it was called at the time they bought it. But so yeah, he legitimately deserved a shot. Like if you look at him through the junior series and all at Formula One. But yeah, the only reason he's had a was it like a 10-year career at this point?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's because his dad just bought the team, so he couldn't be fired. But yeah, Mazepin was straight up. The second those sanctions hit Russia, he was off the grid the next day.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That was a straight up pay driver.
They were off the grid too. Like they wouldn't even let them on the track, if I'm not mistaken.
There were sanctions against them, so they wouldn't. They had to undo the sponsorship immediately. Remember, they almost painted the Haas like a Russian flag.
Yeah. Well, everybody thought it was red, white, and blue because of the American flag.
No, everyone knew what it was.
It was red, white, and blue because of the
Russian flag or whatever. And then, they were about a year away from Gene Haas selling it to the Russians, and then sanctions came in, and that never happened. All right. Anything else you want to discuss before we go prediction time?
I do want to get into a little bit something that I talked to you about before
All right.
the show. There has been some speculation by Red Bull. Red Bull, there's a story out that they went out and they got a thermal imaging of the rear end of the McLarens. What I want to talk about is this material called phase change material. This is what they're kind of speculating is going on with the McLarens. So what we've seen a lot this year, and you could see it, even in the last race, is that these McLarens, man, they're great on these long runs. They might not be able to get that top end one lap pace like Max can get in qualifying, and light those tires up as quick, but their tires aren't falling off as much as everybody else, and that's what everybody's starting to notice up and down the grid. And what a lot of people are talking about is especially in the Formula One circles, is there's a thing called phase change material, like I said, which is basically a material that when it heats up to a certain temperature, it will phase into a liquid state. And when it does that, it regulates the temperature. So it's like if you imagine something that gets water cooled, the water will cool it off. But once it gets back down to that certain temperature, it'll then change back into a solid, which will then allow it to heat up again. So if you can imagine, what that's doing is they're putting it in the brake system, and that brake system is then heating up the tires, because as the brakes get hotter, it'll heat up the rim, which will then heat up the tires. And what most cars are dealing with is they're blowing out those rear tires or heating up those rear tires to a point to where they're slipping and sliding, and they're losing that rear grip. The McLarens, because of what they're speculating is this technology, is able to regulate the temperature better on those rear tires, which is allowing them to last longer and be more effective throughout an entire run. And like I said, we've seen that with this McLaren specifically all year, to where they're catching up right at the end of these races, or they're pulling away if they're in first, towards the end of these stints, because they're having such better they're regulating their tires so much better than everybody else. Everybody else, while they're struggling with it, they're struggling with their rear tires going away from them. McLaren hasn't been dealing with that as much. So I just want all of our viewers and everybody to get that word in their head, that phrase in their head, because it is something that could change the landscape of Formula One in the next coming years. If other teams can start developing this technology, it's really going to help out the longevity of these tires and make it to where stuff like this is the innovations that we like seeing moving forward into our cars, into regular driving cars or regular road cars, because these are the things that Formula One allows for in the regulations. They say
Well, they
that they're
do right
kept.
now.
Yeah, exactly. But they allow them to experiment with things like this, and these experiments that they do like this is what then bleeds down to road cars. So that it's an interesting technology to read up on. It's interesting to see that teams are actually starting to implement it. If that is exact, because this is all just still speculation, because the FIA looked over the rear brakes of the McLaren after the last race in depth, after the protest by Red Bull. So it was one of those situations of they didn't see anything in there that looked off. They didn't see anything in there that they wanted to penalize. But this is kind of what they're saying is the technology that McLaren might be using. So it's definitely, like I said, an interesting thing moving forward, and something that I expect a lot of other teams to try to implement within their own braking systems in order to try to elongate the tires and make them not fall off as fast as they have been. Because I mean, you've heard almost consistently from every other team, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, you hear them constantly on the radios. Man, these tires are falling off. I got no rear grip. I got no stability. These tires are undrivable. I haven't heard McLaren say that once all year, and this could be the trick that they're using, and this could be the little secret magic bullet that they have that's going to help them, or stay ahead of the game above everybody else throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I think I think the way that I think it's clearly legal under the current regulations, and it would be absurd to ban it. However, with the new regs coming in next year, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to ban it going forward, just because, as you said, it's a huge advantage, and that's an advantage that will carry forward. And you can regulate the temperatures in your tires better than the other teams. That's something that, regardless of the car design, is going to carry forward. And the amount of money, again, this is a cost-saving venture as much as anything now, that other teams have to put into developing that. I'm sure FI is going to be under a lot of pressure, because the only team that would really care this year and that's why they're complaining about, is Red Bull.
Yeah.
Everyone else has moved on to their
to
their other car, or even though they are making some, like Ferrari and Mercedes are still rolling out new parts and new development because of their brand names, and they can't just throw it away. It's embarrassing. Like I said, Ferrari was embarrassed in Miami. They can't do that. They have reputations to uphold, but whether or not they want to sink a bunch of money into developing this system to try and mimic what McLaren's doing, no, they're probably going to pressure the FIA, hey, ban this next year.
Yeah.
And we've seen stuff like that in the past. I mean, the last time the McLaren had a huge innovation was the F duct. And by the end of the year,
the DAS for Red Bull, remember that?
That was Mercedes.
Oh, Mercedes, you're right. Sorry, not Red Bull.
But that was only, they could only use it in warm ups, and it was a little bit different. But if you recall, the last time McLaren, the reason I brought up the McLaren was they did ban it. That stuck after a year, but then it eventually evolved into DRS. But they had essentially stuck up a vent in their front of the car, where if their drivers pressed their leg up against the side of the car, it would block the vent, and the airflow would stall the wing in the rear, which is essentially a form of DRS, and they use it on the straights. Obviously, back then there was no DRS, or you have to be within 1 second, so just use it the whole lap, on every lap. And then other teams tried to copy it and ended up, setting up different ways of doing it, though, with like their hands, and that's when it got banned for being not safe. It's one thing to kind of slightly wedge your knee against a vent; it's a whole other thing to stick your arm out and block it with your hand, which is what some of them develop. But so at this stage in this cycle, I do think there'll be a lot of pressure on the FI to ban this sort of thing going forward, so that way the other team, otherwise the other actually 10 teams with Cadillacs coming in would have to develop their either to ban the one thing from McLaren than to expect the other 10 to develop it. But it's certainly legal now, and I can't imagine they're going to ban it this year. I mean, that's how one of the people, obviously Mercedes is hybrid, especially at the beginning of the hybrid era, their engines were better significantly. They developed a better engine, which eventually other engine manufacturers caught up, but it was a big advantage there. And obviously they built better aerodynamic cars for that design. But a huge part of that was actually a similar thing was the open, back then they had the open rims. This was the way they handled the airflow through there. They did a great job on the aerodynamics of the wheel.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons in this iteration they banned that, made it closed wheel. So that to take away that advantage. Just similar to McLaren and say, we're going to take away your advantage so that you can't carry it forward to the next generation.
Yeah, but I mean, in the other vein of it, you also have, in still speaking about the Mercedes and how good their engine was, the reason the engine was so good was because of an innovation that they, designed with the split turbocharger, where they had the turbine part of the turbocharger in the front of the engine, and then the compressor part of it in the back of the engine, and they were just connected by a shaft. And that's really what all the Formula One engines have switched to now. And you're actually starting to see that in some, road going cars. Not a lot, but some of the higher end performing road cars that they have now is they'll have a split style turbocharger to where, the hot part of the turbocharger that's getting powered by the exhaust isn't close up with the cold side, or what they like to say the cold side of the turbocharger, which is where all the fresh air comes in that gets then pumped into the engine. You split those up, which is what Mercedes had innovated, put one on one side of the engine, one on the other side of the engine, or front and back technically, that created a more reliable engine. And that's why we don't see a lot of these engine issues anymore. I don't even remember the last time we heard of an engine blowing up, in Formula One anymore. While back in the day, the turbocharged engines were good for like a lap. Well, Okay,
Who blew up?
but it's not the same. But
No,
it's
no.
not the same type of blow up like what
No,
we're
but that
used to.
was that was actually a blow up. But to your point, I can't remember. Like that was like, holy crap! Did that?
Yeah,
Wait, why is there smoke? Like you said, it used to be every race.
yeah,
All right, at least one or two of these is going to just completely let go, and you're going to see a huge. You're going to see
exactly.
fireworks coming out the back of it. Who blew up in? Oh, God, someone. Was it a Haas? Someone's engine let go, and like you said, it's shocking because that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. And I think let it go. I think it's different than like before we used to see the engines blow up. You used to see the actual engine. Just when it dies like that, it just kind of sputters away and just.
Oh no, this thing blew up though in Miami.
Did it?
Yeah, someone smoked out the back of their engine. That's why you could.
Oh wait, wasn't it Fernando?
It was. Oh God, was it Bierman?
Was it Bierman?
I think it might have been Bierman. Hold on.
I thought it was Alonso.
No, I thought Alonso. Oh. Yeah, it was Bierman.
It was Bierman. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the video now from the back. Oh yeah, there it went. Blew up, flames.
Yeah.
Nothing blew up. Yeah, no, but like you said, they built.
But again, you don't see it anymore.
No, you definitely don't. Yeah. And there's multiple. Like you said, they've innovated around to make them more reliable. But this is where the regulations forced it, right? Because engine penalties. You should not care. I'm not going to spend money on that. It'll make a race, and then we can throw it away.
Yeah. but I'd like to see them not ban this technology and force all the other teams to kind of develop it and get into it, because I mean, think about it, that just makes for better racing. If everybody has good tires throughout the whole race, it makes for good racing.
Yeah, but I mean, if that's the plan, I think they could also have Pirelli make better tires. Like Pirelli intentionally develops tires with a range of wear and like look. Which is kind of interesting that they, obviously they spend a bunch of money on the sponsorship. It's to get their brand out there, and I'm sure it's great for brand recognition. But it's kind of a weird thing where they're tasked with making a tire that falls apart.
Yeah,
or they could develop a tire that lasts an entire race without any issue. Bridgestone used to.
Yeah,
they're not supposed to do that. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Again, I think a lot of the teams will lobby to get it banned. I don't know what the right answer is. I think if it's going to look, as much as I'm a McLaren fan, would love this. If it's such a big advantage and the cost cap is going to mean that the other teams are 2 or 3 years behind in development the next cycle to catch up because of this, then I think they probably do need to ban it. Because the whole point of resetting the car design is to like not have them carry that advantage forward. And if they're able to carry it forward, I don't know. It depends on how difficult it is to develop this. They obviously know because they did detailed, like you said, they scrutinized the shit out of that and didn't find anything illegal, but they know what it's doing now. So if they feel like it's duplicatable pretty easily, maybe they'll leave it in there. If they feel like this is going to take people's entire cost cap to catch up.
Yeah.
Because if you recall, I mean, this is the same generation of McLaren that had Lando pitting after every lap to get his fluids topped off. Same generation is now the best car on the grid. So it took them the whole cycle to get here.
For sure.
But it's going to take everyone the whole cycle to catch up. I mean, again, as a McLaren fan, I'd love to collect the next several titles and not have to worry about it. But I don't know if that's the best thing for the sport. Yeah. Yeah, we get going for the double this year. So
exactly.
All right, I think it is prediction time. So again, it's the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix.
What is it? Because there is a full name. I saw it in when we had up the
it just says I think
the AWS presented by. Come on, we got to say the whole name.
Okay, all right, hold on, I'm getting there. Let's see. It is Formula One AWS Gran Premio del Made in Italy. They switched to English there. Del Emilia-Romagna 2025 Grand Prix.
There you go. Nice. I applaud that one.
All right. Well, yeah. So it's got Formula One in there. It's got AWS in there. It's got Gran Premio, which is Grand Prix, I guess. Del, which is, I'm assuming, same as Spanish, of the Made in Italy. And then Del Emilia-Romagna, and then the number 25. All right. That is a...
That's a mouthful. That is a mouthful.
What is your prediction for whatever the hell it is I just said? All right, so for those in the chat, feel free to drop it in there, and I will drop this gift in there for you people.
There you go. Beautiful.
There it is.
So for that mouthful of a name.
Yeah, so we're talking top 3, and we're talking surprise from the weekend. Again, everyone in the chat, feel free to play along. Evan, what do you got here?
I'm gonna go top 3. Oscar, Lando, Max. I'm gonna go easy. I'm gonna go easy this week. I'm not gonna overstep. I'm not gonna go crazy, especially when it comes to the top 3. I'm gonna go, Oscar, Lando, Max. I think Oscar's been on a roll. Even though it pains me to see it because I want to see Lando win. I've been saying Lando, is going to win for all these weeks, and he has to win for all these weeks. He should win for all, and then he just does something. So I'm going to say Oscar, Lando, Max, 1, 2, 3, and then my surprise of the week, because I can't say Isaac Hadjar again because it's my favorite surprise, is that he's so much better than all the other drivers. I'm gonna go with Colapinto over Gasly. I think Colapinto's gonna outperform Gasly this week. I think he's gonna, whether that's 19th and 20th, which it could possibly be. I think Colapinto is gonna outperform Gasly this week. I think he's coming in with fresh eyes. I think he's coming in with a fresh mind. I think.
So you don't think there's going to be any ramp up to getting used to the car or anything?
I said this to somebody the other day. I don't know. I forget who it was. I think it was somebody at work or something like that. But these guys in these cars, these younger guys in these cars, are a lot more adapted to this generation of Formula One cars, more than we saw before. Like, we talked about Mazepin and Logan Sargent, I know, was in this generation of cars, but a lot of the older generations of cars, when the rookies would come in, it would be a little bit more harsh to see them, come into those generations of cars and stuff like that, because the cars were so much different when it came to the tires, when it came to the size of the wheels, when it came to the way that the cars felt overall. The F2 cars nowadays are a lot more similar to the F1 cars in the way that the aerodynamics work with both of them. They both have DRS. They both have 18-inch wheels. They both have similar. There's a lot of similarities between the F2 cars nowadays compared to the F1 cars that there wasn't before. So I think that a lot of these drivers, like we see with Kimi Antonelli, like we see with Isaac Hadjar, like we see with even Behrman. I know he's been performing relatively well overall. Top tens and stuff like that. That you can see that they're a little bit better, that they're a little bit more adapted to it. And I think that, like I said, that's my surprise for the week. I think he's going to be better because he's coming in with a lot of expectations. He's coming in with a lot of hype, and there's people that are backing him. We know that what's his name, the leader over there in Alpine that just came in. I forget his name right now. It eluded me. Flavio Briatore. That right. He was really pushing for him. So you got him pushing for him there. That's. Sometimes that's all you really need is the top guy to have your back, like how we see with Kimi at Mercedes, and it can unlock some stuff. It can give you that confidence to come in and show what you're really worth.
Yep, and as you said, they just have a lot more practice, even though they're not in the cars, because they all do the sim racing, and not the same thing, but it does prep them a lot better than.
For sure.
Back in the day, driving go-karts is not the same thing. So we got Brandon's pick in the chat. Spending a big weekend, Lando to win, wow. But a big weekend for Mercedes.
Yeah, that's a big weekend for Mercedes.
Two on the podium. I don't know. Last time we had to have been Hamilton and Bottas, right?
Had to have been.
Oh no, it was. But that
George and Hamilton.
That didn't count because Russell got DQ'd for. Was that the only time they both finished at the top?
No.
Remember last year when Russell didn't pit the second time?
Spa.
He got disqualified.
At Spa.
Yeah, he got disqualified for cheating. He's a cheater.
Yeah.
So I'm sure. I think they probably as teammates finished, but it's been a bit. And then Carly's got Max, Lando, Kimi, and Oscar DNF. She's got Max taking the fight back to the McLarens this week, and
she's a Red Bull fan.
Yep, yeah, you can see that coming out. And I think Lando's been faster than Oscar, and a lot of his own doing, but stuff has gone wrong. I think this weekend he'll put it together. So I got Lando winning, Oscar second. I'm gonna go with the Ferrari boost here. Leclerc third. Something gets in there, gets them a little bit forward this weekend, just for old time's sake and to prevent riots. And then you know what? Let's go one more time. George Russell DNF. Gotta have him. He's got priors on this cast on this track of going off. So let's see if he tries to overtake on the grass again and wipes out someone. So
I guess we'll see.
Max can't be all the top three. I mean, although I've seen him do some remarkable things, so I wouldn't put it past him. But
he scored points for two drivers in the what's it called, in the constructors.
Yeah, he's keeping Red Bull in the constructor championship by himself. So that is a. All right. Well, like I said, so the race this weekend is in Italy. As Evan said, it's our time to shine now for us old F1 heads. The classic schedule: practice 1 Friday morning at 7:30, practice 2 Friday morning at 11, practice 3 Saturday morning at 6:30, qualifying 10 a.m. on Saturday, and the race 9 a.m. on Sunday. That is what we call a classic weekend schedule for F1. And Jeff thrown in there with the McLaren. There's no reason. I agree. I don't think it's going to change this year, frankly, because there's not a lot of development going on. And I actually think Max is overdriving that car. I don't think there's development that's going to push it any further than Max has somehow been able to do. So that car, it's not as bad as the second driver, whether it was Liam Lawson or Yuki, has looked in it.
Yeah,
but it is probably slower than the Mercedes in a normal driver's hand.
Yeah.
And
I would agree with that.
He is wringing the neck out of that thing. And I don't know what kind of advancements they could do that are going to actually, offset him having to adjust a little bit, because he's just overdriving it. So anyway, we'll see. It should be fun. It's first of 3 races in a row. I guess before we wrap, we can real quickly run down the coming schedule. So we got Monaco next week. After this weekend is whatever the hell this race is called, Imola. Next weekend,
AWS Grand Prix del Made in Italy del Emilia-Romagna 2025.
Yeah, that thing. Next weekend is Monaco, again a week early this year, and then Spain the week after that as your triple header coming up. And we'll see. I mean, if the McLarens dominate those 3 races, we'll start to see that distance there. And if Max can't stay within touching distance, this might turn into a Rosberg Hamilton situation.
Yeah.
Although I don't think these two guys hate each other, so yet.
I don't think so yet.
Yeah.
I don't think so yet. Let's see what happens at Monza.
If it ends up being a two horse race, then maybe they do start crashing into each other, and that's where the animosity starts. But anyway, we'll be back next week, same time, and we'll be talking about for sure a McLaren win. So thanks everyone for hanging out with us, and it's gonna be a fun 3 weeks down a row of racing. So can't wait.
Yep. Bye everybody.